Well, we have one last very important conversation to have now here in Bengaluru. We have the Honourable Minister's words just there about how pitching that India Inc. story is so absolutely vital. So our final session now is going to be around how do we build on what we've seen so far in India, and how do we accelerate the next financial building blocks? How do we use what we've learned here in India to benefit the wider world? So I've got a couple of people joining me virtually, and then I've also got one person joining me on stage. First of all, let's introduce the virtual panelist. We have the co-founder of Alpha Wave Global, Navroz Udwadia. How are you? Are you there?
Good. Yep. Good. Thank you.
All right, nice to see you. And we love to be dynamic and inclusive as well. So coming to us from the lounge in Heathrow, delighted to see the co-founder and CEO of True Beacon, Richard Pattle. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Ian. Sorry I can't be there in person. I'm going to miss you by about 12 hours, but thank you for including me today.
Absolutely. And also I want to welcome up here to the stage, partner at Accel, Prakash. Thanks, Ben. You can come and sit here closer to me, otherwise it feels too lonely over here. So why don't we start, let's start with Navroz first of all. The Indian tech startup ecosystem has really undergone some seismic change over the last few years. In your experience, what changes have you seen in the investment landscape?
Several, I think. First, I think the degree of entrepreneurial ambition and energy has never been higher. That's the function of one whole India Tech 1.0 having developed, scaled, created a huge number of mini or micro entrepreneurs who are now have some capital at their disposal, have relationships with people such as the Tigers and the Alpha Waves of the world, and so are willing to step out of the Tech 1.0 names, the Flipkarts and the Paytms and the Zomatos, and create their own businesses and their own adventure. So I think that's number one. I think business models, certainly business models that I invest in, whether it's Swiggy or Lenskart or Moglix or off business, they're now starting to look outside of India, which I think is healthy once you've established yourselves as either dominant or quasi-dominant in your home market. So I think business models are taking the first steps to kind of build more diversified revenue streams. I think in India also, just as a macro backdrop, which I think is particularly relevant given what's going on in the world right now, we're rapidly approaching the S-curve of consumption, the bottom of the S-curve, which is $5,000 to $10,000 of GDP per capita, at which point there's a nonlinear explosion in discretionary purchasing power and discretionary income. And I mean, we've seen this play out in dozens of economies over a century, and so there's no reason why India shouldn't be any different. And then lastly, people like Prakash have contributed to the building of a very, very strong and vibrant ecosystem. We, for example, have a $400-500 million early stage fund that is very focused on India. We have a $10 billion fund, of which a significant amount of capital is focused on late stage India. The pool of capital that is focused on different silos in the investing spectrum on India has deepened considerably. So I think these are kind of 4 or 5 big changes that we've seen.
Point, because it's one of the things that I come from Silicon Valley, and there's always a lot of discussion about the ecosystem, how important it is. Tell us from your view what you think has been built here.
So first of all, it's great to have a true hybrid. We've been talking about these hybrid conferences, but it's good to be in one. So I think the part that really has accelerated stuff in India is the digital rails that have been built. So if you look at the first large company that got built out of your Flipkart, for them to get to the first million customers took them maybe 4 5 years, the next big company, let's say somebody like a Swiggy, took them 2 3 years to get them to 1 million customers. And today, because UPI and the payment ecosystem and just the habits that have been formed from, I think habits and how people behave, and that juxtaposed with the Gen Zs and how they start becoming the key drivers of change. I think all of that starts kind of snowballing, and the time to get critical mass is getting more and more compressed. So I think that is the biggest change that we have seen in the ecosystem. And once you see that compress, I think there is more capital that comes in, because capital goes where you can get money in and make more out of it faster, right? So we've benefited a lot from that. And finally, the China plus one thing, right? So where people started really seeing this ecosystem as a more broad-based entrepreneurship. I think people miss that. I think India not only builds technology for all the great opportunities we have here in India, but we are actually the technology powerhouse, digital powerhouse for the world. Like the minister was saying, I think that talent is, of course, there to build for the back offices of the world. The Google of the world is going to build the next product from here. Intel is going to build the next product. But there are new entrepreneurs who are building technology products ground up in India, not serving just the customers in India. Very few of their customers actually are in India, but in 40 other countries. So that is the other big change, where entrepreneurs are building enterprise-grade products, which is what Israeli entrepreneurs were able to, and quickly migrate value to the US and build sales and marketing. So that is starting to happen. So there's this nice twin engine now working in India. Entrepreneurs building for the country and entrepreneurs building for the rest of the world, and both are firing.
Well, speaking of the rest of the world, Richard, let's come to you. Let's get your view in terms of someone who's operated around the world, in terms of what you found interesting and unique about working in India. We've had your colleague on from True Peak and Nikhil, but let's hear from you, your thoughts.
Yeah, I think particularly now it's an incredibly exciting time for India. I think that I'm now very fortunate to live and operate in Bangalore. I've become an entrepreneur very late in life. But I think in terms of India in general, but perhaps Karnataka in particular, you now have a unique crossroads where human capital has been connected to vast opportunity. Both the government of India and the state government has done an exceptional job about creating the right conditions for businesses and entrepreneurs to thrive. And I think that I've been very fortunate. I've been coming to the country now for 30 years or so. I see now a level of ambition that, as Prashanth has said earlier on, doesn't just extend to building exceptional businesses across India, although that is a very compelling market, of course, for anyone. But now entrepreneurs are also focused on building businesses for the rest of the world. And I think that's what's really changed, vis-a-vis Silicon Valley, perhaps over the last 5 years or so. And I think that's why Bangalore in particular, but the entire country now is obviously becoming a world leader in so many different areas. And I think it's, for foreigners like me, what an exciting place to be, hopefully for the next 10 or 20 years.
So, Navroz, let's ask you, if we're building businesses here in Bengaluru that could go everywhere else in the world, how do we finance this next stage of growth? What sectors are investors, do you believe, looking forward to investing in?
Sure. I can't really talk to others. I can share what we're looking at internally. I spend approximately 50% of my time on Web 3.0. It is a critical part of how we think about the world going forward. We have a dedicated team, literally what I would call my SWAT team internally, where all they do is spend time in this space. We have $1.5 billion out of our new $10 billion fund that's dedicated explicitly and exclusively to Web 3.0. And it is the only aspect of our investing that we haven't slowed down in this current market environment, which I'm quite pessimistic about, not just in terms of where starting point valuations were, as Nikhil alluded to on the panel before me, but also the global read on what's happening in Europe with Russia and Ukraine and how that could impact India. So whether it's L1s and L2s, or whether it's critical parts of infrastructure like market makers, wallets, or dApps, we are spending a lot of time on the crypto landscape, and we've made, I think, about 20 investments over the last year in that space. The other more traditional spaces that we're focused on are fintech and SaaS, but in both cases, there have been fairly significant multiple re-ratings. 5 years ago, you could buy best-in-class global SaaS names at publicly listed at 10 times revenues. Today in the private markets, something that does $2 or $3 million of revenue trades at 250 to 300 or 500 even. I have an example where a very well-known India-focused firm did around $500 million on a SaaS company doing $3 million of revenue. So we're waiting for that deflation to happen. It's already happened in the public markets. Private markets, yes, tend to lag public markets. So we're kind of sitting patiently and waiting for some degree of sanity to return to SaaS and fintech valuations. But SaaS, fintech, Web 3.0, and consumer internet are spaces that we spend a lot of time on.
Interesting. I want to know, Prashanth, if you want to build on that. And the other thing I'd love to know is how have investments in India's tech ecosystem or New India Inc. fared versus other global benchmarks, would you say?
So on the first one, we work very closely with Navroz, and I think a lot of the sectors are very common in terms of, VCs are known to do things in herds. And,
around the world, not just in India, right?
But outside of Web3 and SaaS and crypto, what Navroz was talking about, B2B in this part of the world is still a very fertile and important sector. So in the Western geographies, the whole supply chain, manufacturing, and the demand chains were all very well organized over 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. Technology slowly kind of seeped into that. Organization of those supply chains happened over many years. So here, all that is what happened in 50 years in those countries is happening in 10 years, thanks to technology and thanks to digitization. So that acceleration of efficiency in B2B is giving rise to a lot of very India-specific opportunities. And this is a very interesting thing that we are seeing. And they can be replicated in Indonesia, replicated in other countries, which kind of miss the kind of the broad industrial revolution and the industry 3.0, 2.0 kind of technology efficiency. Because US just did that for 20, 30 years, right? Just drove efficiency into industry. So that just didn't happen here. So now technology entrepreneurs are not afraid of going and tackling, these industrial grade problems and not stopping at just delivering food and groceries home. So I think that's a very important new opportunity in the country. Now what was the other question that you had? How are we different here? Or how have
investments in India's tech ecosystem fared versus other global benchmarks?
See, this is a very good question. I think what our entrepreneurs have learned. There was this. It's important to talk about. This is not the first wave of entrepreneurship, right? You had the IT industry. A $200 billion IT industry has been created in this country. There has been a large wave of entrepreneurship, and what the IT industry has done well. Of course, they took time to do what they did, but I think they have been able to build very enduring, robust, profit-generating businesses. And today, if you look at the top 10 IT companies globally, 6 or 7 of them are Indian, right? So that's how big a transformation they have done for an industry, which is $1 trillion industry, and it's about 200 to 250 billion right here in India. Now, in the startup world, we have created $250 billion of market cap. But will this market cap endure? If it has to endure, you have to really understand how to build durable economics. You have to understand, these entrepreneurs have to understand how to now shift from just scaling to scaling profitably. And when you go IPO, there are a whole other set of challenges. How you kind of take companies public and answer investors quarter on quarter and deliver predictably quarter on quarter. So all these have not been areas that the current unicorns have been tested with. So I'm just kind of, that's a word of caution that I think this is something that tech startups in the US have learned over decades in the technology, not in the services space, but in technology and product. These companies have done it over years, and I think it's time for Indian entrepreneurs to demonstrate that. And just to put it, maybe it's a little bit of, I think there has to be over time less natak and more true delivery. Heads down delivery of profits, and that's what investors will look for.
Get on with it. So I want to bring Richard in. I'm nervous about you missing your flight, so I promise we'll let you get onto the plane on time. But I know that something that you think quite deeply about is GIFT, the Gujarati International Financial City. I'd love you to tell me about that and its significance.
Yeah, GIFT was started several years ago. The Prime Minister of India had the foresight when he was Chief Minister to really grapple with the issue that India needed a financial services centre that could be a gateway for international capital to come into the country, but to also be an ecosystem. And so for those who haven't been to GIFT, I would strongly recommend going there just outside Ahmedabad. But it is what they've created there is not only world-class infrastructure, but also more importantly, since they have adopted a unified regulator around 2 years ago, enshrined all of the tax treatment for investors properly into the tax codes of India, they've really created a very highly competitive jurisdiction for international investors, both for monies and investments flowing in and out of India, but more importantly as an ecosystem. So I think that for international investors who perhaps had to grapple with other jurisdictions such as Mauritius, Singapore in the past, now they can have the best of both worlds. They can have a financial center that's in India, but it has offshore status. So we were very proud in True Beacon to be the first operational hedge fund there. You've got many of the international banking and financial services centres setting up in GIFT now, and indeed obviously all of the domestic players too. So I'm very excited about where that jurisdiction can go in the future, and I think it's high time that India had a world-class centre. The infrastructure is there. We're still building obviously the human capital that will make it a very competitive ecosystem, but I would say to anyone who hasn't experienced GIFT, go and have a look at the centre, go and talk to them. They're highly entrepreneurial, and manages to combine world-class regulatory standards, but with a very entrepreneurial spirit.
Navroz, what about this question? How can India continue to benefit the wider world with the lessons of its own digital and technological transformation?
I think two things that kind of come to mind. One is continuing to build the ecosystem via capital, and as Prashanth said, all of us capital providers have a responsibility to cut out a lot of the, I think Prashanth described it as natak, which I would agree with completely, out of the ecosystem, and really focus on building dominant businesses with sustainable competitive advantages and a path to real unit economics. There's been a lot of press recently about one of India's major fintechs and all of the natak that's been going on there. And these kind of episodes and outcomes are really bad for the ecosystem as a whole. And I think that we sort of all have a responsibility as fellow investors. We have seen a lot of founders. We are seasoned. We have muscle memory. It's really kind of incumbent on all of us to be good actors and not let these sort of outcomes happen and reach critical mass, which was reached in the case of this fintech. I think the other thing that would be great is in the US and in the UK, China, and even Israel, universities play a critical role in serving as a funnel between outstanding student and tech talent and access to people like Prashanth and myself and Richard. And we don't really have that in India. And I think I think now is the right time for universities, whether in Karnataka or NCR or Mumbai, Maharashtra, to set up, MIT type entrepreneurial cells, R&D labs, and partner closely with people like ourselves and Accel, who we have great regard for, and serve as a conduit or a bridge of outstanding tech talent that they see coming through their pipeline and onto us. So I think these are two cases, having two kind of places of progression, having plentiful but good capital that is stewarded thoughtfully and with the utmost standards of integrity by all of us, and then finding a way for Indian universities to kind of echo what the US, Israeli, and English counterparts have done.
Thank you. So, Richard, is there one thing you could say that India can pass on to other ecosystems? And is there anything that could be brought from another ecosystem to India?
Yeah, I think, on the plus side, without doubt, what's happening in Bangalore in particular, but across the country, is this remarkable human capital, young men and women who are highly educated, high aspirations, starting to have more of a global mindset as well. And I think that that for me as a foreigner living in India right now is the thing that really stands out in terms of what is going to drive India over the next several decades. The extraordinary guys and girls who are building things in India, not afraid to fail, have got a very good mentality. I think in terms of accelerating what's happening now in India, I think that, to build on Navroz's point, I think that, India, although it's done an extraordinary job at government level and indeed at individual state level, not just in Karnataka, but other states around India, of telling the India story. I think that, too often there are gatherings where we end up preaching to the converted, those people who already have access, they have, business dealings in India. I think now the real challenge for India is going out there internationally to those investors, those people who might come and partner with Indian business and explain the extraordinary things that are going on in the country, explain why it's important to participate in the private markets and the public markets in India, explain how Indian businesses can contribute to them sitting in their country, and to really accelerate all of these business, entrepreneurial and investment ties around the world. So I'd say that I think is incredibly important. I know the government is doing a lot and it's been hampered, as we all have over the last 2 years. But now as we come out of the pandemic, I think there's no time to lose.
So much. Well, thank you very much to Navroz and to Richard. We really appreciate your time. Prashanth, I'm going to get you to stay with me on stage, but thank you so much. Navroz and Richard, look forward to seeing you maybe in person at another new India Global Forum soon.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.